Greetings, community on YouTube. This is the KeplerCollege Astrology Book Club discussion. Today I am joined by Arielle Guttman, esteemed astrologer, and I'm so happy to have you with me as we discuss the book of the month, Geodetics by Chris McCrae. See if I can get the cover in the screen there. This is a book about relocating and world affairs. And as I stated, we selected it to be the book title for this month. And there is another previous edition that Chris published that came out in 1988 that you use, Ariel. Yeah, that's what the cover looks like. So we conferred, and they are similar, although the newer edition obviously has chart examples that are more recent than the
Yeah.
1988 version, but the general premise of the book and the whole idea and concept of geodetics obviously remains the same. And I do want to acknowledge Chris McCrae as the author, and she has passed away. I think she passed in 2022, if I recall. There is an entry through the Astrological Association that discusses her and her life's work. And it seems to me, although I didn't meet her, that she obviously was a major figure in the astrology community. And I understand that you knew her and you
Oh,
studied with her.
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how did
Um,
you come
met
to
her.
geodetic?
I think I was it a UAC or it might have been another conference. It could have been an ESAR conference or one of those in California. But I had met her. I actually came across geodetics through a colleague of hers, a good friend of hers, and a colleague of hers named Joyce Wehrman in 1980. I would say that was about 1982 or 83, before I even met Jim Lewis and started working with astrocartography. And Joyce Wehrman was the president of the San Diego Astrological Society. At that time, I was living in San Diego. It's pretty much where I cut my teeth on astrology as a professional, as a student and a professional in my early days. So Joyce, being the president, every month she would open the meetings and she would have a little story about the geodetics. And I thought it was fascinating. And because we lived in Southern California, she would talk, San Diego, she would talk even about the difference between places like LA and San Francisco and San Diego, because they all had slightly different coordinates. And so they were being activated by different energies. And so Joyce, we're talking about legacy tonight. Joyce suddenly passed away, kind of unexpectedly. And just, we lost her in San Diego, and it was kind of a shock to the community. Fast forward to the next big conference I went to, and I met Chris McCrae, and who was speaking there on geodetics using this book at the time, because this is the 1980s. And she well, no, this was before the book came out. She didn't even have this book yet. She was lecturing on geodetics though. uh, and I said, oh, I was a student and friend and colleague of Joyce Wehrman. And she, oh, Joyce, she would say, Joyce, oh, I miss her. But they talked about geodetics quite a bit. So I actually learned about this system. And then I met Jim Lewis at a similar conference and got into astrocartography. And I was playing with the two right from the beginning. I was looking at both systems. It's a brilliant system, especially for political and mundane forecasting. Um, and people that are really into watching what's going on in the world, or even in your own country or your own city. This is a really good chart to use in terms of it's a fixed zodiac. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I just want to say that I know you wanted to talk about the passing of astrologers who have been such a big contribution to the field of astrology and what we just learned today.
Yes, we learned, unfortunately, sadly, the news that Lee Lehman has passed away yesterday. And so that's sort of rocked the community, and we're grappling with that sad news. And she was such another titan, a giant in the field, and did so much to further the study of astrology that it seemed appropriate to acknowledge Chris's contribution sort of on that level too, right? Like it's timely that we're uh doing a book for the month with an astrologer who's also passed away, because there is such an incredible legacy and lineage that some of the astrologers who've furthered branches of astrology in our community. They left this incredible body of work behind. And with Lee's passing and then reading Chris's book, it's made me reflect on how important it is to capture this knowledge in books, right? Like we're having a discussion within the book club here in this age of computers and social media and the way that people consume and learn about astrology. It seems to me to highlight right now the perennial importance of books, right? And how
Yeah,
that is such a transmission of knowledge that you don't get in other platforms, right? Like it seems to me, other than studying directly with the person, reading their work through the books that they write really is a primary way to learn and think about the concepts that they're presenting.
right. I mean, books have been with me forever. I grew up with them. My mother was an avid book reader. She was a member of the public library and contributed to them greatly and was always checking out books or putting books on reserve for whatever the next book was that she wanted. And she got me a library card as far back as I can remember. I had my own card and I could go in there and look at all the books and decide what I wanted to take. And then when I got into astrology, I mean, for a lot of astrologers, especially when some of us got involved in it in the 70s, there were not places where you could gather a lot of astrologers together. There were few and far between. And books were the thing that a lot of people in the 70s and the 80s, maybe even into the 90s, were, although by then there were a lot more conferences going on here and there and everywhere. But books became the how we learned our craft, how we studied a certain technique. And it was one book, you would read one book and it would inspire you to read another, and by the third you would be inspired to write a book. you know um, I've contributed 5 books to the field of astrology over my career in astrology, and they all came to me at times when my major uh, impetus for writing the books was, this is so exciting. I just have to share this material. So authors do, I think a lot of us do it from the heart. It's not a huge money maker. Don't ever think it is. I mean, it might be for some people, but it's not that. It's more like, if you have a passion to do it, you want to do it, and it's a service to your students, and that there's something that they can have and they can hold. Like every time I pick up Jim Lewis's book, I think of our work together on that book and how I miss those meetings that we had, that we used to have together in preparing the book. So yeah, it's a big thing. And I think even in this digital revolution where there's all these books available as ebooks and online, I still think there's nothing like holding the book in your hand and you thumbing through the pages and marking it wherever you want to, and using it as a reference. It's just a wonderful thing. So I really appreciate that Kepler has a book club. When I found out about it last year, because they had featured me for the Venus book, I was delighted to learn about it. It was like, what a great idea, an astrology book club, you know.
It's a fantastic idea and makes a lot of sense, right? Because so much of many of our classes are have a reading list, and we are learning about the concepts through the books. So yeah, I was thrilled that we have a book club, and I'm very thankful that you're here today to talk about our love of books. My grandmother was a librarian, so we share that early library experience in
Yeah,
common. So
the love
really
of
appreciate it.
libraries. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Chris actually, in her introduction to the book, talks about how when she was coming up as an astrologer, she was relatively isolated from the astrology community, just as you said, and books were her connection to it. That was the only way that she learned about, excuse me, other people's concepts and geodetics in particular. She first came into contact with it, the subject, through a pamphlet that was
Yeah.
republished by the AFA, written by
Yeah.
Safariel. So, which I thought was interesting because he was an astrologer who was older, turn of the century, maybe early 20th
Yeah.
century. And
Yeah. I
so the
think
fact
his book came out in the 1920s, somewhere around
Mhm.
1920. Yeah.
And so was he the originator of the concept, would you say, or was he developing it from past studies that he had?
Um, Not really sure about that. I lost track of my Safario book, but I do think that it is an older system that he latched onto. Now, one thing I've got to say is that the geodetic zodiac is based on um, the longitudes of the world. And, it's not that long. I mean, it is fairly a couple of hundred years or a few hundred years, but Longitude was, that's another good book to read that I had read a while back when it came out by Davis Sobel, the book called Longitude. And it was about the race to name the city or the location on Earth that was going to be, navigators really were in need of mapping the globe in terms of longitudes and latitudes and having a tracking system. So there were a lot of countries competing to be the one to have it located over their spot, over their city. And, Greenwich, England was the one that actually became the place that we know, zero longitude. I mean, it's a very common thing for astrologers to say Greenwich Mean Time. Well, now people refer to it as universal time, UT, but we used to say GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, all the time. And that just meant that um, the zero longitude, 0 degrees of longitude was there over Greenwich. And so that was a fascinating book too that I recommend. The longitude that could be added to the reading list too, if as recommended, not required reading for the geodetics course. But I'll get into a lot of those things a little bit more in the geodetics course that I'll be teaching for Kepler. It's coming up in a few weeks. Um, but today, I just really want to give credit to Chris for all the research she did. Writing an astrology book like this, and I know I've done it several times now, with all these charts and graphs and longitudes and latitudes and dates and whatnot, takes an incredible amount of research and an incredible amount of patience to gather all the data and an incredible amount of um, um, dedication to also proofreading it all and sometimes having to proof it again and again and again because it goes through different editorial processes and printing kind of modes. And so, yeah, you have to do all that. It's a labor of love, I would say. So treasure your books from anybody that's written a good book that has inspired you, but especially your astrology books. And realize even if there's something in there that you go, I'm not sure about that, or I don't know if I agree with that. Think about the person that wrote the book. They have really labored, um, lovingly and long, usually, to put out something like that. So I give Chris a lot of credit. And she was a fun lecturer too at conferences. She would always have jokes about different places um, and just talk about some of the um, yeah, just funny things, funny stories. She just didn't just talk about war and earthquake, which a lot of early researchers on mundane astrology did. They would just look at earthquakes and wars, but there's a lot more that goes on in the world than that. But it is a good place to start. It's a good place to start if you're researching wars and earthquakes.
They are notable events, right? You can't help but miss them. So it seems like, and the medieval astrologers seemed pretty focused on wars and
Yeah,
more extreme manifestations of energy that humans experience. So
right.
I wanted to look at a geodetic map here so we can sort of start at the
Okay,
beginning and talk about
sure.
what that looks like. So
Yeah.
tell us about the geodetic map and how it works and how it's different from astrocartography.
Okay. This is one of the reasons that I think geodetics is so useful for mundane forecasting. And I don't call it prediction, I call it mundane forecasting because at um, you can look at the year ahead, you can look at any time period you want at any place in the world. And we know how fast each planet moves and how long they're going to stay over a certain position. We know that the outer planets move very slowly and they're going to hover over a region for quite a while, whereas the faster moving planets move faster. If you do an actual astrocartography map for an event, you 1 minute later, it's changed. 5 minutes later, it's changed. 10 minutes later, it's changed. In other words, the Earth keeps spinning and the planets keep moving. And so it's not like a fixed point. I mean, that's the same principle as our birth charts. If we were born 5 or 10 or 15 minutes later, we would have a different ascendant and a different midheaven. And sometimes houses would change. So when an important event happens, you can look at the astrocartography chart and a map of the event. But when you look and you get an idea of what's happening at that location at that particular time. But if you're looking at a map like this, geodetic map, this is a fixed zodiac. These signs stay the same. They're not, you're not relying on houses, you're not relying on anything else, any other coordinate system. You're just looking at the geodetic. And for astrocartography purposes, and this is what Jim Lewis really popularized, was that the four angles of the chart were the power points. And so here, what you're seeing is all 12 signs of the zodiac stretched across the world. I call it the celestial zodiac, the 360 degrees of the celestial zodiac overlaid upon the 360 degrees of the terrestrial longitude. So it's as above, so below, literally, what's in the sky laying over the earth. And these are fixed points, they never change. And as I said before, because longitude was deemed 0 degrees longitude was deemed to be Greenwich, England, which is just east of London, just a little bit outside of London, like hardly, it's a short train ride away, subway ride away. I've been there a few times. It's a wonderful thing to stand on the 0 degree longitude spot in Greenwich, because you can put one foot on the eastern side and one foot on the western side, and it's what people do when they're there. Kind of a kick. But there's 0 Aries right at the top. And this was not created at Greenwich for any kind of political reasons to assert that London or, the UK had any special powers over the world that other nations did not have, although they did for quite a while. And if you look at that 0 degrees Aries midheaven stretching to the Taurus midheaven, which covers most of Europe, not every single one, but there were empires in Europe with under an Aries midheaven and Leo rising. There was the Greek civilization, there was the Roman Empire, there were France and Germany, and the Scandinavians and the British, of course. I mean, all of them were world powers at one time. Every single one of them had an empire, had a kingdom. And I thought that was interesting also with Leo rising through most of those places, because they all had monarchies as well, or,
Mhm.
uh, a monarchy type system of leaders that were even said to be descended from the gods, back in the early days. And the dividing line for Taurus starts right there in Egypt. And it's really right on the Nile River, practically. On the west side, you've got Aries, and on the right side, you've got Taurus. And so when you think of the Great Pyramids and standing there in the desert, and hearing that the sound of the desert and how peaceful that is, and you hear the morning prayers being chanted from miles away. You're standing right on that 0 degree Taurus energy. And of course, we also had, back in the age of Taurus, which preceded Aries, in this part of the world, we had a lot of symbolism of bulls, and a lot of bulls carved statues and on drawings on walls and things like that. But you had the pharaohs, and you had all the dynasties coming down through that kingdom as well. But what really struck me about the 30 degrees of Taurus in the world, is that the Middle East is completely inside of Taurus. And when we think of Taurus as resources and wealth and property and land and, economy, and you think about all the oil-rich countries that reside in the Middle East, and that how many wars have been fought there over territory or ownership of certain resources. I found that to be kind of incredible as well. And of course, we have one going on right now. And right there,
Mhm.
and 15 degrees of the fixed signs, there are also world points, like 0 Aries at Greenwich is a world point. Well, then we have 15 degrees of the fixed signs, which are also world points. And 15 degrees of fixed occurs right over Baghdad, Iraq.
Mhm.
And when the Iraq War was going on, I was looking at that quite intently, because I was, really reminded about that 15 degrees fixed, that 15-degree fixed cross that was occurring over there. But anyway, what I will go through the whole world and explain, when we get to the class, actually. But I just wanted to mention, if we go to the US for a moment, Um, what's really interesting is we have three distinct zones in the US. Um, Two major ones, and this would probably make sense to most Americans and maybe even Canadians also because they have the same, lines separating them. And that is the eastern US and eastern Canada are all under a Capricorn midheaven. And then when you get to the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes, right there in the Midwest where your arrow is, um, we change. We go from Capricorn to Sagittarius midheavens. And I thought of the Wild West and Go West, Young Man, and all those slogans back in the days of the pioneers and so forth, and the settlers. Um, but Capricorn in the eastern part of the country is so much more conservative. It's so much more traditional. It has all the Ivy League schools. It has the seat of government. It has Wall Street. It has, the economy, the, so much of um, under the Capricorn midheaven in the east. When you get to cross into Sagittarius land, it really is kind of becomes the wild, wild west, stretching all the way over to California. And Southern California is in the very final degrees of the Sagittarius midheaven. And what that means is we would read that as like 0, 1, 2, or 3 degrees Sagittarius midheavens. And I lived in Southern California for a long time, and then I lived in Santa Fe for a long time. So I was under that Sagittarius midheaven, and I could pretty much look at the transits coming up and realize, oh, something's hitting our geodetic midheaven soon. Something's going to happen, or this next election is going to be really crazy because, Mercury's stationing on that point, right on that geodetic midheaven of the state or wherever your location is.
Mhm.
So I've always told my students to map your own city, look for the geo signature of your own city, your own country, and see what you can find as you watch the transits to that point. Go over it. You can use any house system you care to use because houses really aren't so much a part of this. But I have looked at charts of the houses, like the actual chart of the event too. And let's say there's a whole stellium or a eclipse hitting the 12th house chart of the city. I remember an event way back when Los Angeles, for instance, was hit when they had both an earthquake and a very violent set of riots going on in the city that right around the same time and right around the time that it wasn't on their geo angle, it was actually on their 12th house cusp, and other planets were hitting their second house, which talked about all the property, the economic devastation to the place. So yeah, there's a lot of ways. I mean, you could just imagine all the different ways you can work with this geodetic system.
Yeah, I was really taken by all the different facets of it, starting with just the basic flavor of the locale that's indicated by the geodetic map. I live in Northern California, and I can attest to the fact that Northern California, which is more, on the Scorpio side
Yeah,
of the line,
Scorpio
is
side. Yeah,
much different than Southern California, which falls under the Sagittarian side of the line. So that was a mind blower
right.
for me to see that it was very descriptive of my experience living here geographically. So I think that's a great exercise to look at where one's individual place is. And also, I guess that's how it gets factored into relocation, right? Like, will you can get a sort of an idea of the flavor of the experience that you'll have
Yeah.
based on the geodetic map if you go
Yeah.
another place on the planet.
Yes, definitely. It's not the first place I go to for relocation. It's not the first map that I draw upon for relocation purposes. I do look at now for that, for a person's personal astrocartography, I do like to look at their actual map of the ACG map, because that really tells a lot more about them personally in a place, what's happening to them personally. But if you're running for political office in a state or a city or the country, you would really want to look at that candidate's chart on the geodetics of the city or that they're running for. For instance, well, there's a lot of politicians out there that we don't have birth times on. I mean, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of celebrities, and let's say they're film stars, and they want to be based in Hollywood. Well, we don't have all their times of birth, but if we look at the geodetics, how are they connected to Hollywood? And it's not so much will they how well they're going to do. I mean, that's part of it. But, I was looking at a famous writer recently, and she was born in Arizona, but all of her books were converted into a mini series and that was owned by the production company. The streaming company was located in Santa Monica. And so, she had a Sun Jupiter exact Paran over Santa Monica. She didn't have it over Arizona, even though she was a successful writer and had turned into, major miniseries. But I thought, that doesn't hurt if you're a writer or a creative person and you want to get your book published. You look at the city where the publisher is, or if you're a film star, you look at how you're connected to Hollywood, or if you want to go into theater, or how are you connected to New York, or London, or wherever it is you want to be on stage. But there's so many uses of it because I think with that fixed zodiac, that doesn't change. So that's how the world sees you. That's how the world is looking at you. Whereas the astrocartography is more on the inside. It's how you're perceiving everything around you.
I think that's interesting, the frame of reference. And that even
Yeah,
goes back to where determining the 0 point where to start, because I remember in Medieval Essentials 2 that was taught through Kepler College with Ehsan Kazeni, he talked about the Persian astrologers establishing the beginning of the longitudinal system in a different place, right? But
yeah,
but that giving different information, it's true simultaneously, right? And it goes back to the Ptolemaic system that Chris talks about in the
yeah,
introduction, like the
right.
basic conceptual premise for geodetics, right? Where Ptolemy would like the world was much smaller in those days. They
Yes.
hadn't really, all there was
Divided
only a
into
handful of countries,
different
but it was
regions. Yeah.
quadrant, right? And that's how they
Quadrants. Yeah.
determined the
Right.
rulership of countries. It's
Exactly.
interesting. So in our modern times, like I think it's interesting that we've devised a schema that we all use, right? And it's based on something we all use. So it is a frame of reference that's worldwide. It makes sense that it would be
Yeah.
something that sees
Yeah.
the individual as, right? And it's a midheaven thing
Right.
concept, right?
Angles, the four angles, ascendant and midheaven. And yeah, and the thing is, like Cindy, who also teaches for Kepler and is actually the the mapping coordinator for Kepler, has done some presentations on geodetics as well. And she says you can move it, it's movable. If you want to put that 0 degree point over your city or your country, go for it. It's not like anything in astrology is really that fixed, especially a system like this, because this is a derived system. So you can kind of do what you want with it and see if it works. I prefer to use the 0 degrees longitude I've tried centering it over the Great Pyramid, which was one of the earlier suggestions for where to put it, or even over Iraq, which would be, the intersection of the Tigris Euphrates rivers, where, we go all the way back to Babylonian astrology to, some of our earliest roots in astrology, in Western astrology, that is. But, maybe you want to put it over Japan or China or Australia. It could be wherever you live. But I think for the modern, and this was a conversation I was having with another astrologer this week, was that I think we were talking about mythology and astrology and how um, the myths kind of stay the same, but the interpretive quality of them changes through time because there are cultural features that are happening now that did not happen 1,000 years ago or longer. And so we can read them a little bit differently, but they stand the test of time. They're still, they still have the basic archetypal information there, but we're looking at it differently. So certainly, as what we're living, how we're living in the modern world, we probably do want to look at, how the world is divided up right now, just in a physical way.
Mhm. Indeed, yeah, it's
Yeah,
still very relevant. And it has an internal logic no matter where you start it, right? Like there's with all the systems there, which I
right,
think
exactly.
lends
Hmm.
to its power.
Yeah,
And so in
yeah,
addition to sort of looking at your how your natal chart intersects with the geodetics of place, it's also used predictively for mundane events. Do you use it for
yeah.
that?
Forecasting. Yeah, I would say, not, I prefer to stay away from the idea of prediction, but forecasting a little bit different. Just looking at the likelihood of something occurring over a certain region. And, one planet passing over a region, let's say the capital of a country, or retrograding, stationing retrograde, and staying there for a long time over that country is certainly important, but also parans, actual real-time crossings are important. When you get two or more planets crossing over a location, you're you know you're really you're really talking about something big. Like, I was just looking at the war in Iran recently, the day that it began. I think most astrologers took note of the fact that it was the Mars square Uranus, happening at Uranus's last degree in Taurus. It was about 26, it was at about, Uranus was, they were both at about 28 degrees fixed. And remember, I was showing the Middle East being fixed, angles, all four angles being fixed. Well, guess what Tehran's um, angles are? They're 26 degrees, ascend 26 Leo, 26 Aquarius, ascending, and 21 or 22 Taurus and Scorpio on the midheaven. So we had that Mars Uranus square happening in the sky, and all of us in the world were feeling it, in our own charts, one way or another. But Tehran was really feeling it because it was like striking right there. And Mars and Uranus can be, as we know, pretty volatile. And I was reading an article the other day about Dubai. Dubai has really been hit economically. They're evacuating. Um, just hundreds of thousands of people are leaving Dubai en masse, people that have been settled there for ages, because Dubai was really a crossroads. It was a friendly country to the east and to the west and to, world, everybody in the world. But because of this war, they're being affected too. People are leaving. And guess what? Uranus is right over Dubai's, same thing. It's sitting over Dubai's ascendant as this is and midheaven as this has been happening. So you can look at greater regions, not just one country. You can look at not just the fact that Uranus alone is passing through there, but the fact that Mars came in. That would be maybe not the Paran right over it, but Mars affecting the already present Uranus over an area is going to trigger something, something.
Hmm.
And that's why I
Hmm.
say I don't know that I would do prediction on it, because when you're looking at a location, it might be an earthquake, it might be a war, it might be, a new, aliens landing and announcing themselves, I mean, it could be
Let's
anything.
hope. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I like, prediction forecasting is a great term. You can kind of
Yeah,
look at context and the trajectory of events and base probabilities based on that, right? And not so much like X, Y, and Z are going to happen.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have
So
a
lots
comment in
of
the chat.
recent examples, and one that you were involved in. You were in Mexico recently, and you were
Yes,
there really just south of Puerto Vallarta, where all the action was happening for that cartel, the killing of that drug. What do you call them?
El
Drug.
Mencho. El Mencho. He was the
Yeah,
cartel head of the cartel, the kingpin, as it were. And yeah, I
kingpin.
was just so happened to be in Mexico when that happened. Um, And my astrocartography was interesting for that. Aside from the geodetics, I was on my Mars and Saturn lines, like smack right in between them. And when I saw that, when I was planning to go, I was like, "Oh, how bad can it be?" And I found out.
Do we ever doubt astrology?
No, I certainly do not. That's a great case study. But I think
So
one of the
when I
comments in the
looked at
chat
the
is,
geodetic, sorry, I was thinking when I looked at the geodetic, I thought Mexico, Puerto Vallarta, like, yeah, I've been to Mexico a dozen times or more, and Puerto Vallarta a few times. And who would have ever thought that would be a place, kind of like Dubai, who thought that would be
mm,
a place where suddenly everybody's scrambling to get out of there. Um,
right,
but the node, in that case, it wasn't Uranus and Mars. In that case, it was the node, which has been sitting stationary at 8 degrees Pisces for the longest time, since a couple of weeks before the first eclipse, until a couple of weeks after the second eclipse. It's going to really actually start moving off that 8 degree point. But for almost 2 months, it's sitting at 8 degrees, the nodal axis. And what do you think Porta Vallarta's ascendant is? 8 degrees Pisces, right on that
wow,
node. So
wow.
there you have that eruption happening there as well.
It really drew worldwide attention too. I was 10 hours south along the coast, a 10-hour drive, so I was
Yeah,
out of the extraordinary hot spot, but
right.
certainly it garnered worldwide attention, right? So that's
Yeah,
fascinating. You can even the nodes are active
yeah.
in the
Oh, I
sort
think
of
the
frame.
nodes are really important, and because you know, they're tied to the eclipses. And so obviously you also want to look at where the eclipses are happening. Like, I just looked at not the geodetic. Well, I did look at the geodetic. My newsletter is coming out tomorrow. I just finished the edition, the spring equinox edition, and I was looking at charts for the equinox, and the actual regular chart, tropical zodiac chart for the US for this eclipse. The IC point is 20 Leo. And later this year, there's a total solar eclipse at 20 Leo. So I thought, whoa, like that's X marks the spot. It's right on it, and it's right on an angular position. The IC, which is the roots and the considered the homeland of the country. So that could be a very fiery time, you know, there. And then also looked at the geodetic for the same thing. And the geodetic was wild as well. I mean, fire again, repeated the theme of fire repeated again with like 7 planets in Aries right now, planets including a dwarf planet or two and an asteroid or two, but some of the main ones that we use, there's a lot of fire going on right now, and can't we feel it? Yeah, it's like
Indeed.
everybody seems to be trigger happy.
Yeah, very descriptive. That ready, fire, aim energy of Aries that Rick Levine likes to talk about. Yeah,
Yep.
not a lot of
Ready,
forethought.
ready, aim, shoot. Yep. hmm And maybe it's not even aiming, just ready, shoot.
Yeah, ready, fire, aim. Yeah, you aim afterwards.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And then you
It's
think
description.
about it a lot later. Well, why did I do that? Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as someone in the chat has talked about the conservative states being with under falling under the Sagittarius MC, I think that's also another interesting observation. The shadow side of Sagittarius can be dogmatic, right? Like can be
Yeah.
very my way or the highway in its philosophy. It's not
It's true.
necessarily open.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, when I lived in New Mexico, I remember for several elections when they would show those maps, I would say, "Oh my God, I'm living in a blue state surrounded by a sea of red." Like every other state around was red, but New Mexico was blue. I think a couple of other Western states have turned blue since then, but yeah, that is a good point. But I was thinking of the old, um, excuse the term, the old cowboys and Indians and the Westerns in Hollywood and the theme of um, horses in the West, and you go out west, people from the East, even in modern times, will go out west for summer vacation so they can ride horses and be out in the open, under the open skies. And that, so the Western states really does have a lot of that expansive feeling, that big sky feeling, that big, awesomeness of the Jupiterian.
Yeah,
You just feel more expansive out there. And what you
yeah,
were
very
saying about Northern California, that is
no offense,
really
Ian.
amazing because Scorpio being coming right through the middle of California, being Sagittarius in one half of it and Scorpio for the other half. It's a
Yeah, and I've had
distinct,
a very I've had a very direct experience of that because I have I guess it's 27 degrees and change of Scorpio that runs through San Francisco, and my Jupiter is at 27 Scorpio. So when I found that out and I realized that my natal chart intersected with the geodetics of San Francisco and reflecting on my very Jupiter and Scorpio experiences that I've had running about San Francisco in my youth was
right?
another bit of, wow, this is real. This is a very accurate description.
Yeah. And I used to drive from San Diego to San Francisco quite a bit when I lived there. And the fog line starts right about the place where the geodetic midheaven changes. It goes from sunny blue skies in Southern California, and suddenly you get above Santa Barbara and you get into Central California and start heading north up either 1 or 101, and you are in the fog. It's like suddenly it's the clouds of all, it's not even clouds, it's fog. And I thought, yeah, that's another description of Scorpio, being kind of under the veil, so to speak.
Hmm.
um,
Absolutely
of that
obscured,
area.
right?
Yeah,
Hidden
yeah.
underwater.
hmm
I mean, it's just vaporized water, right? The fog.
exactly, exactly. hmm yeah. So it's really fun to play with geodetics. I do recommend getting Chris's book. If some of you that have been around for a while, might have the older edition, the one that I have, and it's still quite valid. I mean, there's really good information in there. She gives the geodetic coordinates for all of the major world cities and a lot of case studies and examples. But the newer book, I'm sure it has a lot more updated events in there as well.
Yeah, it has some updated, like 9/11. She uses as a case study the Fukushima earthquake and nuclear disaster. Um, more recent from the 80s, which is fascinating to read and read her breakdown analysis of it.
Right. Yeah. 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 So, yeah, just the
Have,
main thing with
have
any of these systems in astrology is just start using it and just start practicing it, and you'll gather your own material together and you'll see how it's working.
and have you used for other than the recent strike on Iran, have you used geodetics in recent political events or mundane
Yeah,
events? I know that we had talked at one point about the events that were going on in Minneapolis and how Minneapolis seems to be a focus of a lot of
that
attention
was a
lately.
really interesting one. Yeah, that was a really interesting one. Minneapolis, geodetic coordinates are late degrees of mutable because it's west of the Mississippi. So, which is the dividing line between 29 Sag and 0 Capricorn, as far as the midheaven goes. So, I think the midheaven for Minneapolis is somewhere around 26 Sagittarius, 27 Sagittarius to be precise. The ascendant is 25 Pisces. Saturn was transiting right over 25 Pisces at the time of Renee Good's shooting, killing, I should say. And the asteroid Hygeia was also there, retrograde in 24 degrees Gemini, right on the IC of Minneapolis. And what struck me was not just the fact that Saturn representing ice, okay, and law enforcement and shooting and all those things that Saturn, symbolizes was there. But Hygeia was there too. She's the goddess of health and healing, the one who helps you maintain good health. She was the daughter of the Greek healing god Asclepius, who's a part of the lineage of Chiron, really not beginning with, but you could say Apollo down to Asclepius and Chiron and Hygeia. Well, Hygeia is the one who keeps you healthy or who provides assistance when you're not well or, helps you maintain good health, that sort of thing. Um, and Hygeia was there at the IC. And I was struck by how the community came together in such big way, not just the community of Minneapolis and St. Paul, the whole state of Minnesota, the whole country had protests over this shooting. And then shortly after that, Alex Preddy was shot as well. Um, and it was devastating because, there was Hygeia, but Hygeia was retrograde. It was retrograding kind of a little bit off of Minneapolis, but now at the equinox, it's right back on it again. So I'm wondering if we're going to see something else come up from Minneapolis right about now in this coming week, because I think Hygeia is right over it right now. So that's a
Yeah.
more recent example. I've also looked at, um, I won't go into all those gory details. It's still a case study that I'm working on, and it's a big, huge study. And I've only gotten, this far into it. But I've also been looking at Epstein Island and the fact that the Epstein Island, which is also known as its official name is Little St. James in the Virgin Islands. And its geodetic ascendant is 2 degrees um, Taurus, and its midheaven is 25 Capricorn. And Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, has an exact Mars-Venus conjunction in late Capricorn, right on the midheaven of Epstein Island, although he hasn't actually been implicated at that location, but he's certainly been implicated with Epstein quite a bit and all the things that went on there. But 2 degrees Taurus is very interesting to me because it's right now we're in early Scorpio. In terms of the Venus star, one of the 5 points is early Scorpio, and we're going to be having the very last of the Scorpio star points later this year. And Venus is going to retrograde at 8 degrees Scorpio, and it's going to go back to 22 Libra and then come back to, go back, pass over those points 3 times. So it's going to pass over Epstein Island's ascendant descendant axis on the geodetic map that whole time. And furthermore, Chiron is going to be entering Taurus next year. And it will go up to Taurus this year, but only to 0 something. Won't quite reach 2 degrees, but next year it will. I don't think Epstein Island is out of the news anytime soon. There's still a lot of important astrological energies passing over it. And I think more and more is going to be revealed as time goes on.
Wow, fascinating. Fascinating to see how places on the map are highlighted by this technique.
Yeah. And then I was also looking at all the different people that would arrive at Epstein Island. I mean, we don't know all of them. We don't know. There's so much that's been redacted, and there's so much
Mhm.
that we know the association of these people with Epstein, but we don't really know which location. He had many locations around the world, and now New Mexico is in the news again because of Zorro Ranch. And I said to
Mhm.
one of my friends in New Mexico recently, how is it we lived there that whole time that this thing was going on at Zorro Ranch and we never heard a peep about it? It was never mentioned. And now we know because the New Mexico um, Attorney General has just opened the case again. They were investigating the rumors and the allegations and the complaints back in the 90s when that was happening. But they were shut down by the federal prosecutors who said, there's nothing there, just go away, leave it alone, you know. So now, all these many years later, New Mexico is on it. They're on it and they're digging around, and who knows what they're going to dig up, but
Yeah,
they are
indeed.
digging.
It would be interesting to look at the geodetics and the transits happening there right now. Do you know the midheaven line that runs right through there
Yeah, I
and the
do.
ascendant?
Having lived there for so long. Yeah, we've got like 13 and 14 degrees Sagittarius midheaven on those points. And we have about 3 to 4 degrees Pisces ascendant
Mhm.
there. So we are going to have um, the
That North Node is headed for the ascendant, right?
what is
The transiting North Node is headed for the ascendant.
yeah. And I think there's an eclipse coming up at Virgo Pisces later this year that's going to be at around 4 degrees Virgo Pisces, an eclipse. And yeah, the nodes are heading there. And also Uranus is going to be entering Gemini soon, and it's going to be squaring um, that axis. It 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 will get to 4 this year. Uranus will get to 4. So the square will be happening. So yeah, I actually believe there's going to be a big breakthrough in that location when, all these things, Uranus gets closer to either write on it or the eclipse that we have coming up in, I think it's August, late August, 4 degrees Pisces. Yeah, it's right. It's a lunar eclipse, late August, um, August 28th, 4 degrees Pisces. Yeah.
I really like the layering, like the classical techniques of using ingresses and eclipses and even lunation, regular lunations in conjunction with the geodetic system to see where in for forecasting and predictive purposes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't help but say this, and I don't want to sound political saying this, but I will say that the geodetic ascendant of Washington, D.C. is 23 Aries. But if you're using the US Sibley chart, the US chart was born in Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia geolongitude is 26 Aries. So you've got 23 Aries and 26 Aries over those, even though those two cities are pretty close. Aries is a fast moving ascendant. And so, it's you've got those 3 degrees separating them. And sometimes I've seen quite a bit of activity waiting, not hitting the US when it's at 23, to really like the blow up. I mean,
Mhm.
the drums are beating and rumbling in the background, but it's like, the explosion doesn't come until it hits 26 because that's really the birth chart of the US. So Chiron has been transiting over that point for quite a while now, over a year, and Eris has been transiting over that point of Washington for 10 years because Eris moves really slowly. And, can we see that for
What
the
does that
last 10
correspond
years,
with the last
there's
10 years, right?
absolutely a circus going on in that city, in the country?
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah,
a
fascinating.
circus.
I think that the asteroids and the outer planets and the trans-Neptunians also figuring into this is fascinating as well.
You can use fixed stars also if you're into fixed stars. Certain cities are going to be located right on a fixed star. And then another love of mine, another passion of mine that I've gotten into recently is planetary nodes. And some of the planetary nodes are fixed, especially when you're looking at the helio nodes. But even in the geocentric system, the outer, slower moving planets nodes are moved just relatively very, very little, like Pluto and Neptune and Uranus and, some of those. And in fact, when we have our Chiron return, this is a big thing that I'm looking to. Uh, 2027 in November will be the 50-year anniversary of the discovery of Chiron. And it will be its first Chiron return since its discovery. So, and that was in early Taurus, and that's where Chiron will be in 2027. About 2 degrees Taurus is where it was discovered. And um, where the nodes of Chiron are very close to that. It's like the south and the north lunar Chiron node are late Aries, early Taurus. So they're moving along with where Chiron is right now. So what does that mean to people who don't work with these? I think when a planet is transiting its own node, think of it as supercharged, super, super powerful. It's like it's not only in the race, but it's got the lead position in the race, and it's got all the dignity and all the strength behind it that it possibly can have. So whatever the meaning of the planet is, it's really amplified. I have several case studies of recent planets going over their own nodes. We've had quite a few in the last few years, which is also heightened the feeling of what's going on for us in the world. But something that I think everybody can relate to is back in 2020 when Pluto and Saturn had their conjunction, 22 Capricorn. They were both sitting on their own planetary south node. Pluto
Good
South
times.
Node 22 Capricorn, Saturn South Node 22 Capricorn, right in there. And so it was a heightened, it wasn't just any old Saturn Pluto conjunction, not to minimize Saturn and Pluto when they're conjunct, they can pack a powerful punch. But this one packed a dynamite punch because of the fact that they were on their own south nodes.
Indeed. Wow. That's interesting. I did not know that about the South Node, simultaneous South Node conjunctions as well. Certainly that reverberated. We could all feel that. There was no mistaking it. And that
Yeah,
South Node conjunction too, right? Like point of decrease.
As the years and the decades have rolled by for me in astrology, because it's been 5 decades now of serious study into it, the more that I know, the more I realize I don't know because new things keep popping up or new information that's always been there just reveals itself. And uh, it you can't help but kind of go down the rabbit hole with it.
I think that's the beauty of astrology. As long as you study it, there's always more to learn and more to look at and more to research. And it never ceases to fascinate me with how descriptive it is of our lived reality. So I thank you so much for sharing your research and knowledge on geodetics today, which is just a small
Oh,
piece of
you're
astrology.
welcome. Very happy
I
to
really
be
want
here.
to invite people to join your class. You're giving a 2-week master class for Kepler College coming up on March 29th. So everyone go to the Kepler College store or visit the main website, keplercollege.org, to learn more about that class and to sign up.
Yeah.
And if you, I encourage everyone, if you don't have this book, get it. It's a great book. I'll show the cover one more time. Someone was asking about it in the chat. It really is a fascinating page turner and incredibly well researched. She did a really good job and is sort of like the model of astrological research there.
Right. I think so. I really appreciate, having done research for a lot of the books I've written, I can really, my hat goes off to other astrologers who've taken that kind of time and energy and discipline to put that stuff out there. Um, do we have any other questions in the chat before I sign off?
Well, we certainly can. I invite people to pop any questions in the chat to see. Uh, some were answered, some were asked. There was a question about what books do you recommend on asteroids, and there was a robust discussion. Some people offered
Yeah,
suggestions in the chat, so it's always nice when people are looking out for each other.
good. Well, definitely Demetrius George's book and Asteroid Goddesses. I wrote 2 volumes of Mythic Astrology too that has the asteroids quite covered, pretty well covered in those 2 volumes as well. And then on the more newly discovered dwarf planets, there are a few authors that have written books on the dwarf planets that you can check out. And as far as planetary nodes go, I would say Mark Jones is the leading authority on that right now in the world. He's done quite a bit of really incredible research on planetary nodes, so I would check his book out too.
Great. Thank you. Excellent recommendations. And with that, I don't believe there's any more questions. Someone has said they're signed up for the class, Jay. Well, we look forward to seeing you in class.
We'll
And
see you there.
everyone
Mary,
else,
will you be in that class or will you be part of the?
I might drop in. Well, if you want me to be, I could be there.
Always
I
a
might have
pleasure
to
to
be.
have you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone to joining our live stream discussion for the Kepler College Book Club. If you are not a member, I encourage you to go to our Facebook page and become a member, and you'll be notified of the upcoming Book of the Month title, which I'll give you a little alert here. This will be the first announcement. We're going to feature Peter Stockinger's book on lunar mansions. So for the next title for April. So I'm excited about that. And he will be here next month talking about his book. So once again, thank you so much, Arielle. This has been
Okay.
fascinating.
Well,
Now
thank
I'm
you. I
another rabbit
always
hole.
love chatting with you and sharing this material. So thanks everybody for joining us today. And I suppose this replay will be available on the Kepler College YouTube channel, correct?
Yes, it will be. And so that'll be available for review. And for any new
Yeah.
viewers who missed the live stream, they'll be
Yeah.
watching the
And
recording.
feel free to comment on, in the comment box there too. Yeah. All
Great.
right.
Thanks. Thanks
So
so much,
we'll
everybody.
see you.
Love